Good evening and welcome to this live talking radio event. We are here at the headquarters of Global in Bristol, the headquarters of Hearts West Country, and we're here for this Radio Academy West event with the help of Radio Today as well.
Capital 95.8, stereo for London.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to your host with the most, Dr. Fox.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Neil Fox? Hi, Neil.
Hello there, hi.
Ah. Well, Neil, welcome to the West Country, although you actually know this part of the world quite well.
I know very well indeed. I went to university in Bath and my brother lived in Bristol, so it's rather nice being semi-back home.
We'll come on to URB in just a moment because I'm always interested, as someone who did student radio in people's student radio days. First of all, I'm always intrigued with radio people about how the interest first started because, and I think I can say this in this room, the people who are fascinated by radio, sometimes we're slightly odd. Did it start from a young age? Did you listen to the radio a lot as a child? What was the spark for you?
Don't wrap me up in your weirdness, okay? Actually, weirdly, I think when I didn't want to be a DJ when I was a kid. I wasn't particularly fascinated by it. I just liked listening to it. And I think to a certain extent, that's kind of still how I am. I'm not really a massive radio geek. I just like it and like listening to it. And fell into it slightly when I ended up at university and did university radio and then just got the bug for it, which wasn't what my dad really wanted to hear. I said, I think I want to be a DJ. And at university doing a business degree, and I thought I might end up joining the army, and I'd done all the stuff for Sandhurst, and I was going to go off and be an officer for a few years. And then I ended up saying I want to be a DJ, and it was not quite how he imagined my life being. I remember the only time I ever rowed with my dad, had a proper, stand up, full on, in the garden, shouting at each other, was when I said, I think I want to be a DJ, Dad. And he freaked out. I haven't spent all this bloody money on your education. He went nuts. And I can, now as a parent, I can kind of understand it, because you go through an awful lot bringing your kids up. And if they turn around and maybe dare to do something that you thought wasn't maybe a particularly good career or a secure career or a stable career or one that had any particular prospects, I suppose as a parent you can kind of worry about it. I know, many years later, I think he was quite happy with my choice.
Is it true you sort of made a deal with him and said, if by the age of 30 I'm not on Radio 1, Capital or Luxembourg, I'll call it a day? Well,
look, I ended up leaving uni and I had this dream of being a DJ, but I hadn't got any experience. And at those days, I'd left university Bath and I'd, sort of in my arrogance, I'll send a tape off to Radio 1 and Capital and Luxy and the big station, they'll take me, I'm great. And they kind of all came back and went, yeah, interesting, mate, you have no experience, so go off and get experience and then come back. Things have rather changed now that you can get on a network without any experience, but in those days there were far fewer stations and they needed people with experience. So it's like, I need to get experience. I got a normal job because I had debt, so I needed to get a job after uni, and it was a job in Worcester, which I took. It was because there was a little commercial station there, and I thought, if I can't get on a big station, if I go somewhere where there's a little station, I might have a chance of getting a foot in the door, which is what happened. And then working in the evenings and weekends and managed to get my foot in the door. So I was doing a full-time job, working in a company that made polythene and plastics and printed it, which was good fun, but it wasn't exactly where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. But I enjoyed it. And then in the evenings, I was working for Radio Wyvern at the weekends, getting jobs, £5 a show. I know it hasn't changed much, but no, it was like a £5 a show, and it was like, I didn't give a monkeys. I was on air, and that's all that really mattered.
Yeah.
Working 7 days a week and loving every second of it, really. And yet, when I finally got offered a full-time gig at Wyvern, my dad, I think, was slightly jacked off that I was still playing around with this radio medium. And it was, I phoned him up one day and said, Dad, I've quit my job. And he said, why? And I said, I'm going to go full-time to Radio Wyvern. And he said, please tell me you at least have a plan. And I was 24 at the time. And I went, yeah, my plan is, if I'm not on Radio 1 or Capital or Luxembourg, by the time I'm 30, I'll quit. Because if I can't make it in 6 years, I don't think I'll be good enough.
I want to come back to Wyvern in a moment, but URB, is it true you use the radio name Andrew Howe, which is your middle name?
Yeah, look, my name is Neil Andrew Howe Fox, so and Andy Howe, like lots of DJs use first names
but
and
Neil
middle names.
Fox is a great radio name as it is. You were born with a great radio name. Why go for your middle name?
It's funny, I thought Neil was a bit twatty, really, and I just thought, it wasn't, I don't know, Neil. I'm working on a station now where there's another Neil. I'm a Neil. Our programme director's called Neil. It's like, God, I can't get away from it now. But Neil was not a very, what I call entertainment name.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and people sort of have these names of, I don't know, Michael Peters, or they take their middle name and create their surname with it, and a sort of a DJ name. I just thought Andy Howe sounded, I don't know, it's just my middle names.
And did you go back to Neil Fox when you went to Wyvern then?
Yeah, I did. I just went back to Foxy. I was always called Foxy as a kid, and it's weird now. My 14-year-old son, all his mates come around the house. Oi, Foxy, and it's really. I kind of turn around, and it's my. Clearly, when you got a name like Foxy, you get called Foxy, right? That's your nickname. So I was always Foxy on the radio, and then of course, as I moved on, Foxy became Dr Fox in the end, and what have you. But yeah, it was always Foxy really, rather than Neil Fox.
So after Wyvern, you go off to Luxy.
Yep.
Still a big deal at that point in the 80s
Massive.
as a station. What was it like living there, doing the whole Luxembourg thing? Because I know people like Steve Wright never settled there. We spoke to Mike Reid for our last Talking Radio. Yep. He said he didn't really enjoy being there that much, actually living in Luxembourg. What was that experience like?
Well, it's interesting because I drove across the Luxy from this old Volkswagen Beetle, which was fantastic, and I drove across the Luxembourg and I arrived there on the 1st of February 1987 because I was starting work on the 2nd of February 1987 and it was snowing, and you arrive at this place called Villa Louvigny in the middle of this park in Luxy, and it's big and impressive. And you go inside and you go into those studios, and there's a lot of history there, and you realise who's been there before you and what a history it has. In our studios is where Lord Haw used to do all those broadcasts back in the Second World War, and so from that moment onwards, and then whatever the enormity that Luxembourg became, I think people forget now that there was no Radio 1, there was no pop music, there were no pirate radio stations, there was Luxy. And it was where people, not only in Britain, heard pop music, but also all over communist areas as well. The other side of Luxembourg, is thousands of miles the other way, used to listen to pop music, and that was their first exposure to it at all. And it was an enormous station. And he felt, wow, when he first hit that jingle, that first moment, little fingers on the cart machine shaking before you're about to go live, it's a big deal. Yeah, it really was. And it was the first time also you could go national, and that felt good.
You weren't at Luxy that long until Richard Park comes knocking.
Yeah.
How did that meeting first take place?
Look, Parky was at the time at Radio Clyde in Scotland, and had then got this gig, obviously, to completely revamp Capital, which at the time, sort of up to this point now, become a sort of fat, lazy, boring radio station. Sadly, Capital, it was just sort of like a woman's magazine. It had become, really. I don't think it had become a pop music station anymore. It sort of lost what it was, like a lot of ILR had become, and I think he had been given a job, make it a pop music station, make it number one. And so he was out on the hunt for a team of younger jocks to come and start on the same day, launch a new station, big jingles, brash, let's go for it. And I remember flying in from Luxembourg for an interview, and if anyone has ever worked for the legendary Mr. Richard Park, which I've had the pleasure of for an awful long time in my life, a tough man, and Parky sat me down, and bearing in mind I've walked up through what was the old Euston Tower, which is an incredibly imposing but exciting place to be. This big staircase would wind you up, and the first person I saw down the corridor was Kenny Everett, who was going, "Oh, hello, who are you?" And he was sort of like, "Oh my God." And then it's like I bumped into sort of Blackburn, and it's like, oh my God, these famous jocks are around. And then I sat down with Parky, and he went, "So, Foxy, you say some stupid things on the radio, don't you?" And that was his opening gambit. It's like, what do you mean? And he went, "Like this." And he pushed play, and he'd already got a cassette loaded up from the show I'd done the night before with, I don't know, some link, whatever it was. And I thought it was really funny. So I laugh, and he goes, "So you think that's funny, do you?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, I've just paid to fly over for this interview, and literally, this could not be going worse. And I said, "Well, it's actually funny." And he went, if you think that's funny, dear boy, he said, we've got a problem. If you work here, you're going to have to learn some new things. And I was thinking, this really is now getting bad. And then somehow he said, so, but, when you do start here, we'll have to teach you a few things. So I said, when I do start here, do you mean I am going to work here? And he goes, of course, yeah. Why do you think you're here? And it was like, oh my God, yeah. And I was like very excited, as you can imagine. And then I had a month of flying backwards and forwards from Luxembourg, doing capital weekends, Luxy during the week, which is all quite fun. And then I started. But, he started on 28th of September, 1987, was a day that me and Pat Sharp and Tim Westwood and Pete Tong, we all started on the same day. And it was like launching this new, younger station. And it went on to become, the late 80s and 90s, probably, the greatest station in the world in many respects, but people around the world, even the Americans who we used to dream of and take all their tapes and listen to and sort of try and in a way slightly copy or rip off, they were coming to us now. So Z100 and Kiss from LA were coming over to listen to this new urban sound and what we were doing, because it was a little bit different, and it was just brilliant, absolutely amazing.
So you arrive at Capital, all the stars have aligned in a sense, because you're at this station, it's got the sound you want, an American-style sound in commercial radio. You're at a big station. How does the Dr Fox brand, which became so synonymous with you, how does that establish itself? How did that come about?
He asked me to do a late-night Saturday show, and he wanted it to be rude, live, London, young, go for it. And we thought of doing this thing called the late night surgery. So people would phone in, what you're doing. It was, anything went, basically. Just play a lot of music and have a lot of fun. As long as it was entertaining, it would be fine. And obviously to do the surgery, I suddenly became, the doctor. I made up the jingle, took the Robert Palmer song, chopped it down, did the whole thing, and then I sat in the studio going FOX over it. And
that was you?
It was me, right? And then, so yeah, it was no great. It was like me on a shoestring, make your own jingles. And so, when you could sit down with, literally chalk, and this is the old days, ladies and gents, tape, there we are, cut up with a razor blade, stick it back together, make your own jingles. It was great, 30-second, 20-second, 10-second jingles. But it was a laugh, and that's how it started. And of course, it became very quickly, it was such a great, catchy jingle. And of course, all the jocks wanted to play the jingle, and we made some pretty outrageous promos for the show that they loved playing. And we'd regularly get bollocked for being a bit OTT, but they were good fun. And it was meant to be, it was what it was meant to be. It's meant to be slightly, I think Parker's line was always, which I don't think probably would change if he was really honest, is here's the format. The format is strict and strong. You know where the line is, guys. The clever ones of you will push that as far as you can, step over it every now and again. I will come along and kick you back into shape, and you'll go, I'm really sorry. But actually secretly sort of likes the fact that you all have a format, that you all know what station you're listening to, and it has a sound, but we all sound slightly different at the same time. It's a bit like that Android, same but different thing. I think that's kind of what he wanted out of a lot of the jocks, and I certainly was happy to do that.
So you've been with Capital for several years. Kid Jensen's doing the charts.
Yep.
Then you take over. How does that progression happen for you?
I've been doing there was a little show we did with Kit Kat called The Break, which was my first syndicated show. It was like a magazine show that got syndicated around the commercial network, and that had all been going pretty well. The chart used to be, the old Nescafe Network chart show used to be pre-recorded on a Thursday, which seemed to me insane. How can you be current if you're recording it on a Thursday? So we're already a week out of date, really. And I always said, why aren't we doing it live? It should be live. And then he got me covering a little bit. And when I depped, I said, let's do it live. Let's do live depping, which they thought was slightly, really? It was much more exciting being live. It always was. And because it had much more that could go wrong, which made it much better listen in many respects. And it was live and completely up to date. And then they obviously, very fortuitously decided that when it became the Pepsi Chart, that I would be the host of that. And I think what we you have to always remember that, this is pop radio is about entertainment, about taking people sometimes into a better place. They're having a boring day or they're stuck in a traffic jam. They want to have fun. So my idea with the chart had become pretty boring in my head. It was just 40 to 1, and at number 1 is blah. And I thought, God, this is dull. If I was that artist and I've just got my first ever number one, I literally am going to be going mental, aren't I, right now? This is my dream come true. I'm an artist, I'm number one on the chart. I want to talk to that artist and find out what he's feeling at that moment. So hence we started talking to the artist, doing competitions. Pepsi were the dream sponsor that you still couldn't get better today, really, because Nescafe and coffee wasn't the obvious connection between pop music. Whereas Pepsi had been sponsoring Tina Turner and Michael Jackson and really big stars. They were into music already. And then they decided, I think when Michael Jackson's hair caught on fire, when they were making a Pepsi commercial, that actually, God, how do we get out of this one? They decided, let's not go with a particular star. If we go with a chart, we're kind of with every star, aren't we? And I worked out as a good host for them because I was loud and quite Pepsi Max-ish, which they were about to launch. And so it all worked well. They were a dream sponsor for 10 years. You know, everything we did, the competitions we did were insane sometimes. You know, I remember one week we had 6 holidays to give away to Camp Pepsi Max, and literally your fitness coach was Cindy Crawford, your tennis coach was Andre Agassi, your basketball coach was Michael Jordan. I mean, literally was off the scale. You kind of, let's do 6 of them. Let's do one every 15 minutes. My God, we got some phone calls in that week, as you can imagine. But the whole idea of doing these sponsored things during a chart, are you insane? But the figures proved we weren't insane.
Yeah, because you were beating Radio 1's chart show this stage.
Well, it was about 5-1. They were beating us. I think when we took over, there'd been, Network Radio 1. They were National Radio 1. It was the big official chart. So if you're a kid, you wanted to hear what the chart was. What is number one? The joke was on commercial radio, would always refer to the number one as the one we read about in the newspapers, and sometimes it wasn't what the network chart number one was. So that's slightly embarrassing. You're talking about a number one that isn't your number one, and no one wanted to refer to the network chart number one because no one really believed it was number one because the other song was number one. So it was a slight sort of grey area, but it got sorted out when we managed to do the Pepsi chart. And then, look, between myself and Mark Goodyear, we had some great chart wars for many years, and he was a great formidable ally. And between us on a Sunday afternoon, we had 9 million listeners between him and me listening to the charts, and that was, dream time compared to probably what exists now on the chart. I find it sad now, the chart. I think they've kind of let it all go. They've got too obsessed with its downloads. I don't give a shit it's a download. It's just a song, right? Whether I buy it on a cassette or a vinyl or a CD, it's a song. I can now buy it by downloading it. So it's just a song. Again, I'm not saying, it's not just, it's an amazing song, but, but whether I buy Ed Sheeran, whether I bought it on vinyl in the 70s or CD in the 80s or whatever. So there's too much emphasis based on it's a download. Make it exciting. That whole thing that Kevin Costner did in Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. I still think, do a great radio show, people will listen. Make it entertaining and they will listen to you. Because people say charts are dead. People love charts. People are obsessed with charts. They love countdowns. As long as you make it an interesting countdown, they'll listen.
And whilst Capital's having this great rivalry with Radio 1,
yep.
Radio 1's going under a lot of changes. Matthew Bannister's in charge. You're not telling me he didn't knock on your door and try and nick you at some point, surely?
Well, look, it was interesting because, look, when I look back, the surgery was doing massive business, the chart was doing massive business, it was all going pretty well, to be fair, and actually Radio 1 did come knocking on the door, and I ended up, I remember one Saturday or Sunday going for lunch around at Trevor Dan's house, going out on my bike for a nice, I think he lived out in Cambridgeshire, so went out for a very nice ride over there, and we were sort of sitting down talking about what I do, and it was lots of really good stuff, and breakfast and this and the road shows and like fantasy time in a way, and he wanted me to do breakfast and then end up doing the chart, and you kind of, that's almost greedy, isn't it, really, being able to do like radio and breakfast. And I remember going to talk to Parky, and I said, okay, I got a slight dilemma here. I've been offered this amazing job at Radio 1. And he went, really? And I said, and there's the deal. Okay, there it is. And he went, okay. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, look, I kind of want to stay here, and I want to be greedy, and I want to go, because it's just, it's such an amazing opportunity. And he went, I can't let you go. I can't let you go. How can I let you go? You're one of our biggest jocks here, and you'll go there and take that audience there. I can't let you go. You just can't do that. And that's what a contract's for. And I went, fair enough. And I said, I just kind of wanted to, I just had to sort of get it off my chest and speak to him. And we sorted something out, a new contract for me, and actually I really respected him for that. We always had a good respect, Parky and I, and still do. And it was an interesting moment. And then that was, I don't know, 96, 97. And I didn't go, I stayed, and it was really good, and had a great time at Capital. I'd never regretted a second. There was never a moment where I thought, what if?
Not even a bit, because you never got breakfast on Capital in the end, and even though you depped for Tarrant's a lot, I mean, he had was it 5 months holiday he had at some point?
He did in the end. It got ludicrous with the when he was doing Millionaire, but that was weak management at the time. Trust me, that wouldn't have happened in Parky's day. Parky had left by this time, and that was weak management allowing that to happen. Like, you can't have your breakfast job off for 5 months a year. It's kind of taking the piss, because the reality is it means that I was not on drive time for 5 months. So your whole thing is like a jigsaw moving it around, and that's just bad. It's bad for your whole station. So that didn't really work for me. And then you know, there were some dodgy moments where I was going to do breakfast, you know, and then it just didn't happen. Didn't happen for for various reasons. And of course you kind of go, okay, I'm not going to, you have to come to a point where you go, I ain't going to be doing breakfast here. That's just it. So time to go and do it somewhere else, and shaft them and get number one somewhere else. And you think, okay, here we go. So by this time, my friend Richard Parker had arrived at a radio station called Magic, which was called Melody. And him and I had been talking, and my former managing director, a very excellent lady called Andrea Vidler, had been MD at Capital as well, and she was now over there as MD of Magic. And we talked, and we said, look, we'd have to be careful how we start this, because I was probably the sort of antichrist to Magic in a way. Loud, brash, Doctor was something you would not be hearing on Magic Radio, which was home of Michael Bublé. And I had to sort of learn how to speak softly to start with. And it was, good morning, this is Magic, it's nice to have you listening. And there were times where I thought, oh my God, this is insane. But we knew we had to stick at it because we had a plan. We had a game plan. The game plan was, this will slowly get this thing going. And then, look, within 18 months, we were number one, whatever. So it's brilliant. So it worked. The plan worked, and we got there, and it was fun.
And you do Magic for the best part of 10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Then, of course, it all comes to a sudden stop on that day in September 2014.
Yeah.
We'll come on to the impact that had on you in just a moment, but just talk me through that day, because when I heard the news, aside from the shock of hearing he'd been arrested, the first thing I thought was, they arrested him just after he'd done his show. And with my radio brain on, I thought, don't do it, that's the worst time. How did that day pan out for you?
Trust me, there's no good time to be arrested. It's like, it'd have been so much better if I'd had a nice cup of tea that day, and then I could have chilled out with a nice flapjack, and then I'd be fine. No, it was horrendous. I mean, God, what can I say? It was shocking, horrendous. My program director at the time was a chap called Liam, and we were talking regularly about things we were going to be doing and changing and tweaking on the breakfast show as we move forward. And anyway, and then he came and was outside the studio and have a chat. We're having lots of chats, and then and then it happened, and it was just a horrendous, unbelievable day. You know, hopefully none of you will ever be in a prison cell, but trust me, it's not a fun place to be, and the experience is scary and shocking and destabilizing and everything that you can probably imagine. You've seen it on many TV shows, but the reality is worse, because it's happening to you, and it's not, it's not someone else now, and it's not in an hour's time it'll be, Coronation Street. This is sort of the reality of this is my new reality, and it was terrifying. So thank God for my family and my wife and my kids, who keep you all normal and sane, and great mates and colleagues who stick by you and believe it's bollocks, and that's great. And then you go through a very scary, long process, of which we've seen an awful lot of people from the broadcasting industry go through in the last 4 or 5 years.
Do you think they're an easy target in a way? Because obviously Paul Gambaccini had a similar experience. Do you think DJ is a kind of...
I don't think they're an easier target than anyone else. I just think they were a slight target at the time, and it seems to have stopped now for the moment, which is good. But you go you go through day by day. It's tough. You learn a lot. You have to dig deep. And there are days when your mind takes you to dark places. Other days when your mind takes you to happier places. Thank God for music and friends and family, you know. So there's nothing like walking, you know, putting your headphones on and listening to a great song or listening to a great jock, having a great time when you're having a shitty time on a lovely sunny day, and it perks you up. It makes you actually appreciate how great radio can be, how great music is. And what a great release it can be. And I always remember thinking, God, when I've got through all this crap, when I get back on the radio, I'm not going to be a different guy, but I will have learned a lot of things from this. But it's been hard. It was really hard. Weirdly, one of the fiercest men in radio, Mr. Richard Park, was he's one of the best guys after all this. He was the first person to invite me out for dinner after I'd been arrested. Foxy, let's go out. Him and his wife and my wife, and there were some other really good people in radio who kept in touch and were brilliant. Actually, some weren't, but you know what? I don't think anyone tries to be an arsehole, if that makes sense. I think people sometimes just get it wrong.
I think it's probably just about time to open up to some questions from the floor. So if you've got a question, put your hand up. Downsy's going to come around with a microphone. If you could just introduce yourselves when you're asking a question, that would be much appreciated. So, first question.
Hello.
Is from Radio Today.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Dying to know, that nice lunch you had with Richard Park, was it smooth breakfast?
No, I would not say. I wouldn't say what it was.
I know.
No, I wouldn't. But it was it was really nice to get an offer, actually, because it was very soon after what had happened. It was really nice to know that people out there and they still believe in you in a way, because it obviously kicks you up the arse, and it's hard, So you suddenly find yourself in a position where you've had a pretty amazing life, and then suddenly it's not like slightly gone downhill. It's like it's stopped. There was and doors closed, but other ones opened, which was good. So it was nice. So a lot of new doors have opened and things have happened that have been fascinating. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Patrick, BCFM Radio.
Hello.
You hinted at it. Hi. You hinted at it earlier when you spoke about when you were arrested. As radio presenters, many of us easily judge other celebrities on the radio when they're doing breakfast, and we say, nasty, silly things. Did that experience, or has that experience helped you or changed the way that you think about people that are now in trouble and the way you talk about them?
Well, the honest will have to be yes, of course, because literally when you've sat in court all day and then you go through and see what they've written online, you kind of go, were you sitting in a different courtroom to the one I've lit? You do. It does really make you wonder about journalists sometimes and how they write and what they write, and it's quite worrying. So you have to sort of, as my wife said to my kids, look, just because they've written it down, it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah. Just done that, John.
John Ford. I've like yourself, I'm a similar vintage. Done the commercial radio and BBC over the years, and when you get to old fartness like us, people come up to us and sort of say, "How can I get into radio? Well, what advice can you give me?" So I give them my small bits of wisdom. But what do you tell younger folks who want to get into it? Because it just strikes me it's more difficult these days.
Well. You got to want it bad. You got to really put some graft in, and if you want to be in you don't end up in the right place at the right time. You got to make yourself be at the right place at the right time, and you got to show a bit of commitment to get in there. So for the same as the kids who are on Pop Island, X Factor, It's My Life, and they've never had a singing lesson, you clearly don't want it very badly, because the ones that win all those contests, whether it's Pop Idol, X Factor, none of them are people who just sing in the shower and ended up by luck winning. They're all the ones that had singing lessons, drama lessons. They've been off there. They've all the ones that have grafted. They're the ones that make it to the end. The sob stories and all the other ones are just the ones that make good telly. But the ones that actually do it are ones that have grafted. And I would say, hopefully, lots of people on radio sitting in this room where they've been on air or where they're producers or part of the team, they love radio and they've got themselves in that doors. And we've all worked for nothing. We've all worked for useless money at some point, or maybe still are. But you love it, and part of the reason you need to graft and get in there, I think, really, to prove a bit of willing. And also, you learn. You just cannot get enough experience. Just being in a studio is really useful, and you learn from people, whether it's good or bad. You'll learn something from everything.
Hi, Neil. I'm Joe. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
For people that want to get into radio, they've been sort of inspired by somebody.
Yep.
For me, it was people like Steve Wright or Simon Mayo. You mentioned earlier that in radio these days, there aren't such big prominent figures that people look up to.
Yep.
What has radio got to do to change itself to create more personalities that people look up to then hopefully be inspired by?
Well, I guess it's got to allow some people to have a go on the radio, and it's not just about talking more. It's about being, Kenny Everett wasn't about talking. It was he was a production genius. So he was actually a very shy man, Kenny Everett. Some of you might even know who Kenny Everett was, but he was an absolute legend in the 60s, 70s, and then, crazy Kenny. And he was actually a very shy man who his studio was the place where he could come alive. Like quite a lot of jocks, they aren't actually, not every presenter is loud and able to chat. Some of them actually they create this persona. Like Kenny was probably the ultimate, who was there, and Captain Kremen and all the madness and the crazy stuff. He loved making crazy jingles. So part of his creative genius was making all this stuff in his home studio, and I can't imagine how many hundreds of hours he spent making stuff. But so he talked in between the madness that he created, but someone allowed him to do it. And someone's got to allow a little more freedom. Any more?
One more question, Andy?
Oh, thank you. At last. I'm Andy, other half of Talking Radio. I'm a fan of 80s radio, like the style of the presenting, the jingles, just the feel of it. Now, when you sort of talk to people like Pat Sharp, Mick Brown, Gary Davis, they say that Capital was colossal in the late 80s. You guys are like there's a new rock and roll, wasn't it? When you got to do road shows, about 70,000 people turning up. Was it hard to keep your feet on the ground? Because I've seen footage, just putting together the video at the beginning, of you guys in like shopping centres being like swamped just because you play their records. Was it hard to sort of stay grounded in sort of late 80s, early 90s?
I mean, they were slightly insane times, I have to be honest. So we'd do a road show, and I remember we went out. So Pat, Mick, and myself were sort of the young jocks. We went out and did road shows. I remember these 4 we did with Sega once, and we just went out, Dagenham and somewhere north, south, east, and west, basically. And the average turnout was over 70,000 to come to, and it was us. So that's basically doing our radio show with a few guests on. But the pull of it was insane, and when it was dream time, really. It was brilliant. It was because what you had was this amazing audience who loved what you did. They loved let's be honest, we can slightly massage our egos and think it was about us. We were part of an amazing radio station, and we maybe were the right faces and voices for that station, but they were coming to see Kylie and Big Fun and Bros, and we were very good mates, and we were their access to those people. So they were on our shows every single night. We were friends with these people. We'd be out with these people. We'd photograph with these people. We'd hang out. So if Bros were coming on my show, we'd have 3,000 kids outside the station. But they're not there for me, are they? But to be fair, lots and lots of kids did come up for us because they got to know us and what have you, and they got to know the radio station. They liked the station. It was part of their life. It really was. They loved it. It was the music. It's kind of what, radio, I can only imagine, was in the 60s and 70s. It was kids suddenly going, this is the station that plays all my favourite songs. It has road shows that are free where I can turn up and go and watch my favourite acts. It lets me win prizes, whether it's music, T-shirts, stuff, holidays that I love. It was just their radio station.
Sorry to all of you who had questions we haven't been able to get to. Big thanks to our guest today, Neil Fox.
Thank you very much.
Talking Radio.